The great hall of the Silver Keep buzzed with the usual tension of 100 different nobles trying to coexist after 5 years of brutal war. Meera sat alone at the servants' table in the corner, picking at a bowl of stew she'd been given by the kitchen master who still remembered her kindness during the siege. She'd been at the keep for 3 months now, working as a palace healer, and she still couldn't get used to the looks other wolves gave Omegas. "Don't make eye contact with the high alphas," the head servant had warned her on day 1. "Don't sit near the noble families, and whatever you do, stay invisible. Omegas are tolerated here, but barely." Meera had learned quickly that tolerated meant despised, that invisible meant worthless. She was 28 years old with honey-brown hair she kept in a tight braid and green eyes that had seen too much death. During the war, she'd been a field medic, saving lives on battlefields where Omegas were considered expendable. She had scars on her hands from shrapnel, and scars on her soul from watching soldiers die in her arms. The war had ended 3 months ago with the Treaty of the Blood Moon, but peace hadn't brought acceptance. If anything, it had made things worse. Omegas were blamed for the war, for being too weak to fight, for supposedly betraying pack secrets, for existing at all. "Don't approach the Omega," she'd heard nobles whisper when she passed. "They carry disease. They're tainted by weakness. They'll contaminate the bloodlines." Most Omegas had fled the capital after the treaty, seeking refuge in the outer territories where prejudice was less violent. But Meera had stayed because someone had to tend the wounded soldiers who still filled the healing wards, because running felt like admitting they were right about her. Of division, though the unity was thin and of division, though the unity was thin and fragile as spring ice. Meera kept her head down, eating slowly, trying not to draw attention. She'd learned to make herself small, to occupy as little space as possible, to breathe quietly. Today was no different. Until it was. The hall fell into an abrupt, suffocating silence. Meera looked up despite herself and felt her breath catch. King Dominic Ashford had entered the hall. He was impossible to miss, 6.5 feet of raw alpha power, with broad shoulders that seemed to fill doorways, and a presence that made the very air feel heavier. He had dark hair touched with silver at the temples, a strong jaw marked with a scar from the war, and eyes the color of steel in winter. He'd taken the throne 6 months ago after his brother died in the final battle. Since then, he'd been consolidating power, ending the persecution of Omegas through royal decree, forcing the noble families to comply through sheer dominance. But decrees were just words. Old hatreds died slowly. Every eye in the hall tracked him as he moved through the space. Nobles bowed, soldiers saluted, servants scattered like birds before a storm. The king's gaze swept across the room with the intensity of someone who missed nothing. His expression was carved from stone, powerful, distant, the untouchable. And then his eyes landed on Meera. She froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to look away, to submit, to disappear. But something in his gaze held her captive. For a long moment they simply stared at each other across the crowded hall. The king's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his steel-gray eyes. Recognition? Curiosity? Then, to Meera's absolute shock, he began walking directly toward her. The hall went dead silent. Every wolf in the room watched in disbelief as their king crossed the space between them, his boots echoing on the stone floor. Nobles whispered behind their hands. Soldiers exchanged confused glances. Meera's pulse hammered in her throat. She could feel dozens of hostile eyes on her, blaming her for whatever was about to happen. King Dominic stopped at her table. Up close, he was even more overwhelming. The scent of him, pine and winter storms and pure alpha dominance, made her Omega instincts scream to submit, to bare her throat, to acknowledge his superiority. But she forced herself to meet his gaze. "May I sit?" His voice was deep, commanding, but there was something underneath it. A question that was actually a question, not a command. Meera's mouth went dry. She could feel the entire hall holding its breath, waiting to see if the Omega would be stupid enough to say yes, or her common sense screamed at her to refuse politely, to excuse herself, to run. But something else, something stubborn and tired and done with being afraid, made her nod. "Yes, Your Majesty." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. King Dominic sat across from her with controlled grace, folding his hands on the scarred wooden table. For a long moment neither of them spoke. Meera could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool evening air, and she could feel hostile stares burning into her back. "You're not afraid," the king finally said. It wasn't a question. "I'm terrified, Your Majesty," Meera admitted, managing to keep her voice steady. "But my mother always said fear was a poor reason to be rude." Something flickered across the king's face. Surprise, perhaps, or the ghost of amusement. "You're the healer," he said. "The one who saved 37 soldiers during the siege of Raven's Gate." Meera blinked. How did you know that?" "I make it my business to know who serves this kingdom with honor." His steel eyes studied her face. "You stayed on the battlefield when other medics fled. You treated wounded from both sides without discrimination. You saved the life of my captain of the guard." "I was just doing my duty, Your Majesty." "No," his voice was firm. "Duty is doing what's required. You did what was right, even when it put you in danger." "Yes, there's a difference." Meera didn't know what to say to that. Around them, the hall had resumed a semblance of normal noise, though she could still feel eyes watching their table. "Tell me," the king said, leaning forward slightly. "Why do you eat alone?" Meera's throat tightened. "I'm an Omega, Your Majesty. We're not welcome at other tables." "This is my court, my kingdom." His voice carried an edge of steel. "You should be welcome everywhere." "Your decrees say that, yes. But decrees can't change hearts." The king's jaw tightened. "No, but they can change behavior, and given enough time, behavior shapes hearts." "With respect, Your Majesty, I don't have time to wait for hearts to change. I just want to do my work and not be spat on in the corridors." The king's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "Who spat on you? It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Meera met his gaze and saw genuine anger there, not at her, but for her. "Us in this hall is watching. They're going to in this hall is watching. They're going to talk. They're going to say terrible things about you associating with an Omega. Let them talk." The king's voice was cold steel. "I didn't fight a war to free this kingdom from tyranny, only to let prejudice rule in its place." He paused, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And truthfully, because you looked like you could use an ally. Because I'm tired of watching good people suffer for circumstances of their birth. And because—" He hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "Because I know what it's like to be alone in a room full of people." Meera's breath caught. She saw it then. Beneath all that alpha dominance and royal authority, there was loneliness. The same bone-deep isolation she'd been carrying for years. "An ally," she repeated, testing the word. If you'll have one." For the first time in months, Meera felt something unfurl in her chest. Something that might have been hope. "I would like that, Your Majesty." The king's expression softened. "Dominic. When we're speaking like this, you may call me Dominic." "That wouldn't be appropriate, Your Majesty. Neither is half of what I do." For the first time he smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his stern face into something almost boyish. I'm told I have a talent for inappropriate behavior." Despite everything, Meera found herself smiling back. "I've heard the rumors. Only the good ones, I hope." As they talked, carefully at first, Then, with increasing ease, Meera noticed something remarkable happening around them. Other wolves were watching, yes, but not with pure hostility anymore, with curiosity, with confusion. A young beta knight actually nodded respectfully as he passed their table. A servant girl smiled shyly at Meera on her way to the kitchens. By the time the meal ended and the king rose to leave, the hall's social dynamics had shifted in some small but undeniable way. King Dominic stood, and Meera scrambled to stand as well, nearly knocking over her bowl in the process. "Walk with me," he said. Not a command, but an invitation. "Your Majesty, I should return to the healing wards. The wards can wait 10 minutes. His eyes held hers. "Please." That word, please, added from a king to an Omega, made her decision. "Yes, Your Majesty." They walked through the corridors of the Silver Keep, and Meera was acutely aware of every eye that followed them. Servants stopped their work to stare. Nobles whispered furiously behind their hands. The king seemed oblivious to it all. "Tell me about the siege of Raven's Gate," he said as they walked. "The official reports said you worked for 3 days straight without rest." "There were too many wounded," Meera said simply. "Sleeping felt selfish." "You collapsed from exhaustion. Nearly died yourself." "How do you know that?" "I told you. I know who serves with honor." He glanced at her. "You're a hero, Meera, whether you accept that title or not." "I'm just a healer. There's no just about it." His voice was firm. "You saved lives when others gave up. You saw people, not ranks or designations. That's rare. That's precious." They'd reached a balcony overlooking the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Dominic stopped at the railing, and Meera joined him. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "Sitting with me, walking with me. You're the king. You could command respect for Omegas without this." "Without what? Treating you like a person?" "Without making yourself a target. The nobles already think your Omega protection laws are too lenient. If they see you showing me favor, they'll realize I meant every word of those laws." Dominic turned to face her fully. "Meera, I didn't fight a war to maintain the same broken system. Change requires more than decrees. It requires action. Visible action." "So I'm a political statement?" "No," his voice gentled. "You're a person who deserves respect. The political statement is just a fortunate side effect." Meera studied his face, searching for deception and finding none. Just sincerity, and a bone-deep weariness that matched her own. "Thank you," she said softly, "for seeing me. Not many people do." "Then they're fools." Dominic's steel eyes held hers. "I see you perfectly well, Meera. And what I see is someone worth knowing." Something passed between them in that moment, a connection, fragile and new, but undeniably real. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the spell. A man in royal guard uniform appeared, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty?" "The council meeting. I know, Marcus. I'm coming." Dominic turned back to Meera. "I have duties to attend to, but I would like to continue this conversation. Tomorrow evening, perhaps? Same table?" Meera's heart stuttered. "Your Majesty, I don't think—" "Tomorrow evening," he repeated, and this time it was a command wrapped in velvet. "That's an order from your king." But his eyes were soft, almost pleading. "Yes, Your Majesty," Meera whispered. He smiled then, a real smile that made him look younger, less burdened. "Dominic, when it's just us, it's Dominic." Then he was gone, striding down the corridor with Marcus at his heels, leaving Meera standing alone on the balcony, with her heart racing and her world tilted on its axis. She didn't know that the king had been searching for her for 5 years, that he'd seen her once on a battlefield, covered in blood and saving lives, and never forgotten her face. And she didn't know that the mate bond had already recognized her, even if she hadn't felt it yet. She didn't know that this moment would change everything. She just stood there, watching the sunset, and wondered what she'd gotten herself into. Before we continue, please take 2 seconds to like this video and subscribe. It helps these stories reach more people who need them. The next evening, Meera arrived at the Great Hall early, her stomach in knots. She'd spent the entire day being stared at, but whispered about, and in one case openly confronted by a high alpha lady who'd told her she was contaminating the king's attention. Now she sat at the same corner table, wearing her cleanest dress, still plain, still worn, but the best she had, and tried not to fidget. What was she doing? This was madness. The king of the realm didn't eat dinner with Omega healers. He didn't walk with them, or smile at them, or call them by their first names. She should leave, or should excuse herself before he arrived, claim illness, hide in the healing wards where she belonged. I was afraid you wouldn't come. Meera's head snapped up. King Dominic stood beside the table, not in his formal regalia, but in simple dark clothes that made him look less like a king and more like a man. His steel eyes held something that looked almost like relief. You commanded me to be here, Your Majesty, Meera said, trying to keep her voice steady. I obey my king. That's not why I wanted you here. He sat across from her. I wanted you here because I enjoy talking to you. Because you're the first person in months who speaks to me like I'm a person, not a crown. You are a crown. I'm a man wearing a crown. There's a difference. He leaned back, studying her. You're nervous. Yes. Because of me? Because of them. Meera gestured subtly at the hall, filling with nobles and soldiers. They hate me for this, for sitting with you. They think I'm trying to seduce you, or manipulate you, or... I don't care what they think. Well, I do. Because when you're done with this, whatever this is, I'm still going to be here. Still going to be an Omega they despise. Except now I'll also be the Omega who thought she was special. Dominic's expression darkened. You are special. I'm a healer. I'm good at my job. That doesn't make me special. It makes you invaluable. His voice was firm. And anyone who can't see that is a fool. Before Meera could respond, a servant brought their food. Simple fare, stew and bread, the same given to everyone in the hall. But when the servant set Dominic's bowl down, Meera noticed something. The bowl was chipped. The bread was stale. The portion was smaller than what he should receive. It was petty, childish, but it was also a message. Even we, the servants, reject this. Dominic noticed too. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Has just picked up his spoon and began eating as if the food were a feast. You don't have to do this, Meera said quietly. You don't have to endure their disrespect for my sake. I'm not doing it for your sake. I'm doing it because it's right. He met her eyes. Change is uncomfortable. If I stop the moment it becomes difficult, nothing will ever change. You're a stubborn man. I'm a man who knows what he wants. Something in his voice made her pulse quicken. And what I want is a kingdom where people are judged by their character, not their designation. Where healers who save lives are honored, not shunned. That's a beautiful dream. Then help me make it real. He set down his spoon. I need allies, Meera. People who believe in something better. People who will stand with me even when it's hard. I'm just an Omega healer. I have no power, no influence. You have integrity. You have courage. You have the respect of every soldier you've ever saved. His eyes burned into hers. That's more valuable than a dozen noble houses. Meera's chest felt tight. Why me? There are other Omegas, other healers. Because 5 years ago I saw you on a battlefield. The words came out rough, unguarded. The Battle of Raven's Gate. I was there, fighting in the vanguard. I took an arrow to the shoulder and fell. I was losing blood, losing consciousness. And then, you were there. Meera's breath caught. I don't remember. You wouldn't. You treated hundreds that day. But I remember you. His voice dropped to something raw. You stopped the bleeding, stabilized me, and then you left to save the next soldier. You didn't ask my rank, didn't ask my name. You just saw someone who needed help, and you helped them. He leaned forward, his intensity almost frightening. I've been searching for you for 5 years, trying to find the Omega healer with green eyes, who saved my life and then disappeared into the chaos. And 3 months ago, you walked into my castle, and I finally found you. Meera's hands were shaking. You never said anything. I was waiting for the right moment, trying to figure out how to approach you without using my power to command your attention. He smiled sadly. I'm not very good at subtle. No, Meera agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. You're really not. So now you know. I'm not sitting with you to make a political statement, Meera. I'm sitting with you because 5 years ago you saved my life, and because every time I see you, something in me recognizes something in you. The mate bond, Meera thought distantly. That's what he's describing. The pull. The recognition. She'd been suppressing it for weeks, refusing to acknowledge what her Omega instincts had been screaming. That this alpha, this king, was hers. I don't know what to say, she whispered. Then don't say anything. Just let me know you. Let me prove I'm more than a crown and a title. Let me... A commotion at the hall entrance interrupted him. Meera turned to see a small procession entering, noble ladies in fine dresses, and in the center a little girl. She was maybe 7 years old, with dark hair and eyes that were too solemn for someone so young. She wore a simple dress despite her obvious noble bearing, and she walked with a slight limp. That's Princess Catherine, Dominic said quietly. My niece. My brother's daughter. The child scanned the hall with those serious eyes, and then they landed on Meera. The princess's face transformed. Her eyes went wide, her mouth fell open, and she pulled free from her attendants. She ran across the hall, her limp barely slowing her, and crashed into Meera's legs. It's you! She cried, her small arms wrapped tight. You're the healer! You're the one who saved me! Meera's mind reeled. Yet she looked down at the child, searching her memory. And then it clicked. The siege, the final desperate hours when the castle was burning. A child trapped under debris, screaming, her leg crushed. Meera had pulled her free, set the broken bone, carried her to safety through smoke and fire. Catherine, Meera breathed, kneeling down. Oh, sweetheart, I didn't know. I told Uncle Dom about you. Catherine's eyes were shining. I told him about the brave Omega who saved me when everyone else ran away, but he said you disappeared and we couldn't find you. The entire hall had gone silent. Every eye was locked on the scene, the Omega healer kneeling before the princess, the child clinging to her like she was precious. Dominic's voice was thick with emotion. You saved her. I've been searching for you because you saved my life. But you also saved the only family I have left. Meera looked up at him, tears blurring her vision. I didn't know. I just saw a child who needed help. That's what makes you extraordinary. He stood and addressed the entire hall, his voice carrying with absolute authority. This woman saved the life of your princess. She saved my life. She has saved countless soldiers who serve this kingdom. And yet, you treat her like she's worthless because she's an Omega. His power rolled through the room like thunder. From this day forward, any person who shows disrespect to Meera of the Healing Corps will answer to me personally. She is under my direct protection. She is a hero of this kingdom. And she will be honored as such. He looked down at Meera, still kneeling with Catherine in her arms, and extended his hand. Rise, he said softly. You don't kneel. Not anymore. Not to anyone. Meera took his hand with trembling fingers. The moment their skin touched, like she felt it, the mate bond snapping into place like a key turning in a lock. The recognition, the certainty. From the look in Dominic's eyes, he felt it too. Catherine beamed up at both of them. Uncle Dom, can Meera come live with us? She can be my friend and teach me healing and tell me stories. Catherine, one of her attendants said nervously, the Omega has her duties. Meera is a royal guest from this day forward, Dominic said, his eyes never leaving Meera's face. Or she'll have rooms in the family wing, full honors, and her duties will be whatever she chooses them to be. Your Majesty, Meera whispered, I can't accept. You can, and you will. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. That's an order. But his eyes were asking, Stay. Please stay. Yes, Your Majesty, Meera said, and she stopped fighting the pull. Stopped resisting the bond. I'll stay! The hall erupted, some in applause, some in shocked whispers, some in outrage, but Meera barely heard it. Roses were in full bloom. Roses and lavender were in full bloom. Roses and lavender filling the air with sweetness. Meera walked among them, wearing a dress of soft green that Dominic had insisted on gifting her. Her hair was unbound for once, falling in waves down her back. She'd been living in the castle for 6 months now. In 6 months of learning what it meant to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. The court had eventually accepted her, some grudgingly, some with genuine warmth. Catherine had become her shadow, following her everywhere, learning healing arts and asking endless questions. And Dominic had courted her properly. Walks in the garden, conversations that lasted until dawn, stolen moments in quiet corridors where he'd cup her face and look at her like she was precious. He'd never pushed, as never commanded, just asked and waited and proved with every action that he meant what he said. Last week he'd asked her to marry him. Not because you're my mate, he'd said, kneeling before her in the rose garden. Not because the bond demands it, but because I love you, Meera. Because you make me better. Because I want to build a life with you. She'd said yes through tears and laughter, and he'd kissed her like she was air, and he'd been drowning. Now she waited in that same garden, and wearing a crown of flowers Catherine had woven, while the entire court gathered to witness what would have been unthinkable a year ago. A king marrying an Omega. Dominic appeared at the garden entrance, and Meera's breath caught. He wore formal robes of midnight blue, his crown catching the sunlight, but his eyes were only for her. He crossed the space between them and took her hands. You're beautiful, he whispered. You're biased. Completely. He smiled. Ready? Terrified. Good. Me too. He squeezed her hands. Let's do this anyway. The ceremony was simple, but profound. Ancient words spoken under open sky, witnessed by hundreds who'd come to see their king wed the Omega, who'd changed everything. When Dominic kissed her, sealing their bond, making her his queen, the crowd erupted in genuine celebration. And Princess Catherine, standing as flower girl, beamed with pride, and whispered to anyone who'd listen, I knew she was special. I knew Uncle Dom would see it. Later, he can't believe this is real. Believe it. Can't believe this is real. Believe it. He pulled her close. You're my queen now, my mate, my everything. I'm still just a healer. You're never just anything. He kissed her forehead. You're the woman who saved my life twice. Once on a battlefield, and once in a dining hall when I was drowning in loneliness. We saved each other, Meera corrected. Yes, Dominic agreed, resting his forehead against hers. We did. From inside they could hear music and laughter, the kingdom celebrating, a new era beginning. Tell me something, Meera said. That first day, when you sat at my table, Were you really that brave? Or were you terrified? Dominic laughed. Terrified. Absolutely terrified. My advisors told me it was political suicide, that I'd lose the support of the noble houses. Then why did you do it? Because my grandmother once told me that fear was a poor reason to be rude. He smiled at her shocked expression. And because I'd been searching for you for 5 years. Once I found you, there was no force in this kingdom that could keep me away. Meera kissed him then, pouring 5 years of loneliness, and 3 months of courtship, and 6 months of falling in love into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Dominic smiled. "My queen," he murmured. "My king," she answered. And somewhere in the great hall, Catherine told anyone who'd listen about the brave Omega who'd saved her, and the stubborn king who'd been smart enough to see her worth. About how sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is choose connection over fear. How sometimes sitting with the outcast changes everything. How love, real, honest, fearless love, can reshape kingdoms. The end. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. I love hearing from you. And if this story touched your heart, please subscribe. It helps more people find these tales of courage and love.